Hey you guys, I wanted to cover two stories today about a group of Tuskegee leaders who are fed up with Confederate statues still remaining intact after several centuries. And then there's also another issue taking place in South Carolina right now where Black people will need to leave their homes because the expansion of a new highway has become present. Apparently, regarding the first story, the Tuskegee leaders have had enough. They are tired and growing weary of the exasperating and exhausting efforts, having to witness these horrendous stationary obstacles. And I'm going to talk about these stories while also providing some feedback and context to our community's priorities when it comes to deciding what takes precedence in terms of issues that plague our progression. And I also wanted to make this video when I saw both these topics because it's just something that's been on my mind. I do see a recurring pattern of behavior lately that I believe is a major hindrance and serves us no benefit collectively. And I'm going to read this first part of this story and then give my thoughts on it. So it is an article and it starts off by saying that ever since the murder of George Floyd and the protests that followed as part of America's racial reckoning last year, Confederate monuments and statues which symbolize cultural heritage for some also presents painful reminders of America's racist past to many Black Americans. The statues became a focal point in cities across the nation, many of which were taken down and removed altogether. However, in Tuskegee, Alabama, one 113-year-old relic has remained. The statue was not given to the Daughters of the Confederacy state of Alabama or Daughters of the Confederacy nationwide or southernwide. It was given to the Daughters of the Confederacy of Macon County, which does not exist anymore, and it's not a white-only park, so it's obvious and clear it goes back to the county, said Tuskegee lead mayor Lawrence Tony Haygood. Haygood, 69, says the effort to remove the Tuskegee Confederate memorial in the city's town square is nothing new to locals. He says today, more than at any time over the past 50 years, the majority Black city is finally inching closer to having the statue removed. That is, if a judge in the 5th Judicial Circuit of Alabama decides the land it sits on belongs to Macon County instead of the owners of the statue itself. The Macon County chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. So there's a lot to talk about with this portion. I need for us right off to understand that when the George Floyd situation occurred last year, it was highly publicized. The entire world was aware of the injustice that happened with George Floyd. And while his life being taken away was unfortunate and sad, I proposed a theory last year that symbolism would be at an all-time high and Black people would foolishly mistake this for a tangible development. What I mean by this is businesses using the hashtag for Black Lives Matter, everyone suddenly recognizing and acknowledging Juneteenth, and using rhetoric suggestive of support for Black lives to save their businesses from the wrath of cancel culture, which doesn't work. Now take note how none of those topics from the itinerary I just gave to you are in no way, shape, or form the equivalent of laws, legislation, or reparations, but instead words and palpable actions that are just enough to satiate the thirst Black people have for satisfaction, minus the physical, which is what they truly desire. And it doesn't take a tremendous amount of effort to understand the pathology Black people have when it comes to reaching for straws and thinking any type of action is somehow indicative of moving an inch forward. And trust me, I do get that these statues are painful to look at because it is a constant reminder of how our ancestors were at the mercy of the larger society. And a part of me actually agrees with the leaders that they should be removed for that reason alone. I am not in opposition of this at all, but I'm merely pointing out something that I hope over time becomes increasingly more obvious, which is the fact that this is a surface level issue. If we look at this image of an iceberg, notice how what we perceive from the surface appears to somewhat be manageable and it looks as though it can be conquered. But what we need to pay attention to is the bulk of the iceberg underneath the surface, the area that is obscured and not easily visible. This area represents the source of the problem for Black people. And so if we were to strategize, would it be wise to start at the surface and work our way down, or should we devise a plan in which we attack the base or the root to clear the omnipotent force that barricades our path to success? Getting back on track, I would not be surprised if this judge declares a ruling in which the statues are permitted to stay, because even when we remove the racial aspect from this judge, Their allegiance to the larger society, undoubtedly, and even if the ruling is in favor of Black people, could it be considered progress if we're fixated on directing our attack towards the top of the iceberg as opposed to its base? And symbolism takes its position at the top where we can easily see the action taking place. What we should strive for are those victories that are deep down under, towards the bottom portion of the iceberg to effectively clear the obstacle. But there's still more I want to say about this, so let me read more of this because I think it will help you guys understand how the larger society sees this issue, and you'll see that we have two remarkably different perspectives. So moving on, it says, it was determined at that time that the Daughters of the Confederacy said they were in control of the square, and they would work something out with the county. That never happened. The county kept pressing, and it came to who actually controls the square. The 1st of September, the county decided to file the suit to have it determined that they own the square, to have it be cleared from a legal standpoint that they own the square, said Haygood. Haygood says the monument was erected in 1909. Local officials at the time gave the statue and the land it sits on in Tuskegee's Town Square Park to the Macon County chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. The park was deemed for white people only. Haygood says by the 1960s, Black people assumed political power in Tuskegee and Macon County, and calls for the statue to be removed grew louder. On January 3, 1966, tensions reached a boiling point when civil rights activist Sammy Lehman Young Jr. was killed by a white gas station owner for using a whites-only bathroom in Tuskegee. It was defaced and vandalized as a protest. Since that time on and off, there have been discussions about removing the statue because it was predominantly African-American leaders in the community and predominantly African-American government at every level, said Haygood. The technicality of who owns the land the statue sits on has stopped any serious effort to move it. Haygood says the statue's perseverance throughout the years is painful to many Black residents who see it as a constant reminder of Alabama's racist history toward Black people. Now, I hope you guys were paying attention because according to what this article entails, the Daughters of the Confederacy really weren't too concerned about having the statues removed because subconsciously they are aware that this issue doesn't present any danger to their community or traumas, because if anything, it just emboldens their people to be callous and barbaric as they always have been. And why would they be in such a hurry to remove something that empowers their people to be vicious and savage, to massacre and rule over Black people? Of course they aren't going to take it seriously because it doesn't negatively impact them. And I think something else we fail to understand ultimately is that the South is still heavily perforated with racism, and though race is something that fuels the decision of every circumstance throughout this country, that mechanism is amplified times 10 when it comes to the southern region of the United States. Think about the fact that you have governors that perpetuate systemic oppression at its highest when it comes to any regulation of laws, and how the Black people who dwell within the confines of the South are almost always met with a grim and cruel fate because we are the ones who are at the mercy of the larger society and a prime area where tyranny is effervescent. And ironically, even a majority Black city does not have power to dictate over what is permissible. And I want to take a moment and shift gears because while we are talking about the corruption in the South, Black people are now victims yet again of forcibly being uprooted from their homes in favor of a highway that will run through the area that they reside in. Now, I saw this trending on Twitter, and in South Carolina, there are Black people who will unfortunately lose their homes because a highway was approved that will cut directly into the area that they reside in. Now, this, of course, will cause Black people to become victims of mass migration, and I read that ostensibly Joe Biden's Invest in America Act is unable to interfere with this plan, meaning that this will happen without intrusion. The worst part about this occurrence is that if Charleston County is in control of this plan, they have the potential to continue this destruction throughout historic areas pertinent to Black people. Now, you guys understand why I had to create this video for you, to understand how the decisions being made are deliberate and done with purpose. You see how the areas that are affected aren't areas predominantly populated by the larger society. Mass migration and gentrification are two other areas of systemic oppression that disproportionately affect Black people. And these two are easily overlooked because we usually put police brutality at the forefront of everything as if we aren't facing disparagement in any other area. And I wanted to talk about this segment for a reason because can we really say that we're making any form of progress if situations like this continue to happen? If we continue to accept symbolism and think that having one police officer serve a few years for taking the life of a Black person is something we should accept as evolvement when it's nothing more than inertia, then we have a serious problem. And referring back to the iceberg example I used earlier, the situation that the Black people are facing in Charleston is the area of the iceberg that cannot be seen from the surface. Because the source of where this problem emanates from is the subterranean or the submerged part of the iceberg. Now, before I move on, I don't want any of you to get the wrong impression or interpretation that one of these areas of disenfranchisement is worse than the other, because really any problem is still a problem at the end of the day. And steps have to be taken in order to resolve whatever problem is harmful to our community. And I'm just saying that when it comes to symbolic endeavors, we have to be able to recognize that these do not directly benefit or better your routine livelihood. It doesn't do anything except contribute to the amount of dopamine, which is the chemical released by your brain, be increased. And dopamine regulates your mood, and it's what's referred to as the happy hormone for those who don't know. But really, we shouldn't become complacent with symbolism. And I get that we already are in this stage, but I'm hoping at some point we gradually become more aware of what's symbolic versus what's corporeal. Voting is symbolic if it does not promise perceptible results. I know that might be hard for some of you to wrap your thoughts around, but the sooner we get that, we might be able to take some steps forward. Let me know your thoughts on this video. Do you guys believe that our priorities are not in proper alignment when it comes to choosing which problems deserve attention first? And what do you think about the Black people facing mass migration in South Carolina due to a highway being more important than cultural history? Make sure you guys sound off in the comments section, like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you in the next video.